New details just in to CNN about a fatal ICE-involved shooting today in Biddeford, Maine. An immigration rights group says the man was a 26-year-old from Colombia who was authorized to work in the United States. Maine Senator Angus King says he spoke to DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin about the incident and was told that this person was the target of an immigration enforcement operation and had been ordered removed from the country. King says Secretary Mullin also told him the man was shot after he allegedly tried to weaponize the vehicle he was in. The senator adding that the agents were not wearing body cameras. A witness says an ICE officer repeatedly yelled before opening fire after a car appeared to drive toward him. Another witness says the man was bleeding profusely from the head and told the officers, quote, "I tried to stop."
Biddeford resident Laura Peters told CNN she heard multiple gunshots come from the intersection of two nearby streets around 7:17 this morning. The gunshots are heard in a video captured by her doorbell camera. Let's take a listen.
Oh, is that a car?
Multiple gunshots can be heard, but Peter's surveillance video doesn't appear to show, any law enforcement or vehicles or personnel. Reacting to the shooting, Maine Governor Janet Mills posted the following statement on her official Facebook page. "I have been briefed on the fatal shooting," she said, in Biddeford this morning involving federal law enforcement. "I know that situations like these are alarming and frightening. The Maine State Police are at the scene supporting and working cooperatively with the Attorney General's office, Maine's Office of Chief Medical Examiner, and federal officials to determine the facts of what occurred this morning."
The fatal shooting comes just days after a federal immigration enforcement officer shot and killed a Mexican immigrant during a traffic stop in Houston, sparking new calls for transparency and accountability. We're joined now by John Sandweg, former ICE acting director under President Obama. John, thanks for being with us. What questions do you have about how this particular case unfolded based on really the few facts that we know here?
Yeah, Brianna, I mean, it's the same as always, right? What caused the officer to think he was in, mortal fear here of imminent bodily harm? But also, Brianna, look, this is now at least the 18th shooting involving ICE since the commencement of the Trump administration, involving someone in a vehicle. Right. So what I want to know is, why was the operational plan here to take this guy into custody while he was driving? Could we have done this in a way that posed less risk, not only to the individual himself, but to the ICE officers themselves? Car vehicle stops are incredibly dangerous. They're not something that generally federal agents do. Those are what state and local police do in marked vehicles. It's especially not something that ICE has done, and definitely not something they've done much of over the last 6 years, Brianna, where the majority of the arrests have taken place of people that are already in Border Patrol custody or in custody of state and local police. So I want to know, what was the plan in terms of when we went to apprehend this individual that made us say, hey, a vehicular stop was necessary, and that we couldn't have let him at least arrive at his destination, take him into custody there, or take him into custody before he ever got into that vehicle?
Is it problematic that there appears to be no body camera footage? That's what Senator King is saying at this point. Of course, we haven't seen video.
Yeah, ICE has said they're going to roll out the body cameras, but again, this is the second shooting now, with the Houston shooting just last week, where no body camera was footage. I would also urge, listen, the best way to protect these agents themselves is to have the body camera. The body camera, oftentimes, more often than not, the body camera shows and justifies the use of force used by the law enforcement officer wearing it. I would like to see make this a priority, right? We know, listen, it's not a shortage of money. ICE has never in the history of ICE been so well funded as they are right now. I would urge the secretary to, quickly deploy body cameras to all officers so that we're not all in the dark trying to figure out what happened here. And Brianna, let me say one other thing, of course. We're still dealing with this massive credibility gap that really arose in Minneapolis, right? So now the body camera can help eliminate those questions, eliminate all that suspicion that the agency is under whenever there's a use of force incident as to whether or not the officers are telling the truth. I hope that we get those body cameras deployed as quickly as possible.
That's what I was actually going to ask you about, because federal immigration officials, they haven't exactly earned themselves, right, the benefit of the doubt. Because in past federal officer-involved shootings, even when there turns out there is video, it's emerged and it does not match up. There have been key cases, obviously, where it does not match up with the initial accounts that we have heard from federal immigration enforcement. I do wonder, it seems like that is just so imperative when it comes to having those body cameras, if you're surprised that that hasn't been solved for yet more broadly.
Yeah, Brandon, listen, look, first of all, let me back up. I will give the credit to the department so far today. I have not seen a statement yet, right? As we saw in many of these officer-involved shootings, what was happening was the department was rushing out a statement where basically it looked like they already made up their mind, right? That the shooting was justified, that the deceased weaponized their vehicle or took some other action that threatened the officers. And then lo and behold, video comes out that appears to undermine, right, that narrative. I think, look, give credit to the department. Thus far, I've not heard a statement. I don't think any statement would be appropriate other than we're going to conduct a full and thorough and fair investigation into this. But you're exactly right. It's a kind of combination between those statements and then video evidence emerges later that undercuts that creates that credibility gap. Of course, body cameras would eliminate that. But Brandon, one other thing very quickly. The department needs to step back right now, though, and ask themselves, why does this keep happening? As I said, this is the 18th, at least the 18th shooting involving a vehicle. I really, really hope that we're looking, especially when you're involving a non-criminal. Someone, as I understand it, thus far, at least the initial reporting is this individual has no criminal history. What was so urgent that required us to make a traffic stop, putting those officers in a position where they're in danger themselves and obviously the driver? Why did we have to do it this way? And I hope that, as this investigation goes forward, we take a step back and do a further review about our operational tactics and minimize the risks of this happening again.
Yeah, you're giving some credit, I think, to DHS under the leadership of Mark Wayne Mullen, in that you see a difference in how they're reacting initially to something like this happening. But as you are questioning the tactics here and the continued involvement of ICE in these shootings, are you seeing a substantive difference there or no?
Yeah, we were, right? There was a real shift back in those tactics, back to those more targeted operations. Historically, Brianna, during my time at DHS and ICE, when we did targeted operations, that typically meant we were going to try to get someone in their residence first thing in the morning. It was, and I have to say, the number of situations where officers were put in danger or there were shootings were very, very limited. I don't have specific numbers, but far fewer than what we're seeing today. What we have seen, I will say, and give credit to Secretary Mullen, we saw a reduction in those more demonstrative ways of doing enforcement, right? That show of force, those confrontations with protesters. We went back to that more targeted approach where I think, again, it was done in that quieter manner that lowered the temperature for everything. I will say over the last couple of weeks, it feels like we've seen an uptick. Reporting has come out, of course, that the department has again come under pressure to increase the number of, ICE arrests. And I worry that, when you're under that pressure to do ICE arrests, I've often said this, that the number of arrests, it really is an enemy of the quality, right? If you're doing that targeted operation focused on the worst of the worst, typically those people are harder to find. It takes more, investigative time to go out there and get them. It takes more officers to take those people into custody, and you result in lower numbers. I do worry that over the last couple of weeks, as we've seen the last two shootings, that it is directly related to this pressure the agency is under to ramp up the number of arrests, which is pushing the agency to again engage in tactics that pushes these officers outside of their normal experience and training. And in this case, that means vehicular stops.